I want tasty sourdough bread and not a new hobby. So I've developed the minimum set of skills that enabled me to bake this sourdough bread that is not perfect but is delicious. I'm comfortable with my bread not winning any awards. I'm comfortable with not being an expert bread maker. I'm comfortable with good enough, gloriously average sourdough that fills the kitchen with lovely fresh bread smell and that is a joy to eat. Here's how I make it. First of all, I get my bread making equipment ready. Let me show you what I have. A stand mixer with a dough hook. I know some people say mixers like this one are not great at kneading bread dough. I've never had the opportunity to use a commercial grade bread dough mixer, so I have no idea how it would compare with that. I have, however, had the opportunity to try kneading dough by hand, and I did not enjoy it. I found it boring and tiring. My stand mixer saves me from that, and the results are good enough for me. Next, I have scales. Scales are a must-have for me. I don't think I could achieve consistent results without weighing ingredients. I strongly dislike recipes that tell me to measure baking ingredients in cups and spoons. Apparently, American measuring cups are different to British measuring cups. And when I tried to find out which kind I have in my cupboard, it turned out they were neither. So I like the metric system, and I like measuring things in grams. Another essential piece of equipment is, of course, an oven. I have an electric oven with temperature control settings. The next item on my list is a glass vessel of suitable size with straight sides and a lid or some kind of cover. A container where I keep my sourdough starter. I have several containers and lids in rotation because I like moving the starter to a clean container every time I feed it. I used to have my sourdough starter in glass jars, but I've discovered that a more shallow, wide container is much easier to clean. The small glass container you can see here is a nice shape in my opinion, but it is too small. Sometimes this happens. So yeah, the container needs to be significantly larger than the amount of starter when it's first freshly mixed, because the starter grows in size a lot. I have a spatula for getting the starter out of the container. A spoon would also work, although I prefer a spatula. I've also prepared a bread loaf pan with a lid. This particular one I'm not a fan of due to a very sharp edge here. I don't know if it's faulty or if all pans of this type have this issue, but this particular one I have here is sharp enough to result in an accidental cut, so I try to remember to only grab it by the long sides. Another thing I don't like about this pan is that dough tends to get into the corners and it's hard to clean because of this. This pan received a lot of positive feedback from people on the internet, and many of them said that it's easy to clean, and I just don't understand how. How is it easy to clean? I can't wash out stuff out of the corners without using toothpicks. I'd like to find a different pan. If you have any recommendations, I'd love to read them in the comments. For my purposes, the loaf pan has to be rectangular and come with a lid. I have found out that making freestanding bread, as opposed to bread that is shaped by the loaf pan, takes more effort and requires more skill than I'm willing to develop for an output that tastes the same. Also, rectangular bread from a loaf pan is more convenient to use when making toast or sandwiches. Based on this, a rectangular shaped loaf pan with a lid is what I need. Temperature probe thermometer to check the internal temperature of the dough. I also have a fridge in the kitchen, and that's where I keep the dough after it's risen until I'm ready to cook it. A stainless steel wire rack to cool the bread on after it's baked. I like the stainless steel one that is dishwasher safe. I've also prepared a timer. An optional piece of equipment is an elastic band to mark the height of the dough to see how much it's risen or how much the starter has grown. I'm saying it's optional because I used it the first several times I made bread, but now I just eyeball it. Now let's talk about the ingredients. Water. 250 milliliters of clean drinking water between 20 and 28 degrees Celsius. Sourdough starter at its peak. I initially spent 3 months of my life trying to make my own active starter, but my dedication, research, and energy investment didn't pay off. It was still weak after 3 months. So I bought some good starter, and it is so much better. This is what I use now. In essence, the way it works is you take a little bit of starter and you feed it a mixture of flour and water. After you feed a healthy sourdough starter, it starts increasing in volume. It reaches its peak and then it starts decreasing in volume again. So when I'm making bread, I use the starter at its peak. I don't use up all of my starter when I'm making bread because I need to leave a small amount to grow the next batch of starter. Many online sources recommend keeping the starter alive by using the following ratio: 1 part starter, 1 part flour, and 1 part water. Although this ratio works well, it results in the starter peaking in size too quickly for my liking, meaning I have to keep feeding it several times a day, which is not what I want to do. I feed my starter at a different ratio. I use 1 part starter, 3 parts water, and 3 parts flour, all measured by weight. So for me it is 25 grams of starter, 75 grams of flour, and 75 grams of water. This results in me having 175 grams of starter, of which I will use 150 grams for making bread, and the remaining 25 grams I can use to start a new batch of starter. So far we've talked about 2 ingredients, water and starter. The next ingredient I need to make bread is of course flour. I use 300 grams of white flour, 85 grams of whole wheat flour, and I use 15 grams of wheat gluten. The reason I add wheat gluten is because our flour is too low in protein. Diastatic malt powder, 2 grams. It's a small amount, but I find it enhances the texture, the color, and the flavor of the bread. Salt, 10 grams. I put water into the mixing bowl first and then mix in the starter. Then add flour, gluten, diastatic malt, and then salt. I knead it on the lowest setting of my stand mixer for 5 minutes. After the 5 minutes, I take the dough out of the mixer bowl and place it in the glass container. I close the lid or cover it with another covering. If I wanted to use a rubber band to mark the levels of the dough, now would be the time to put it on the container. Now I have to wait for the dough to achieve a 75 to 100% increase in volume. So am I aiming for 75 or 100% increase? I'm okay with either, or anything in between. I can accept the variation in dough bubbles that comes with this method. Time is not a reliable indicator for when the dough is ready. Sometimes on a warm day it takes 5 hours for my dough to rise to my desired volume. and sometimes on a cooler day it takes 12 hours to rise to the same volume. This dough here has reached, and then exceeded, my desired volume range, so it's ready to go into the fridge until the next day when I'm ready to cook it. In the morning, I take the dough out of the fridge, remove it from the glass pot as gently as possible, and place it inside the loaf pan. I cover the top of the pan with its lid. I preheat the oven to 225 degrees Celsius, then place the bread in the loaf pan inside the oven for 50 minutes. At 50 minutes, I check the internal temperature of the dough. I found different sources recommend different internal temperature. I don't know which one is correct, but for me, I aim for 96 degrees Celsius or more. If it were less, I'd put the lid back on and recheck in another 5 minutes. My thermometer just showed 97 degrees Celsius, so I continue baking the bread without the lid until it achieves the color I like. In this particular case, it took another 10 minutes, making the total bake time 1 hour. I cool the bread on a wire rack for 90 minutes. And now I can slice it and enjoy the deliciousness.